Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the regular meeting for the Ojai City Council and the Ojai Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency for September 10, 2013 to order. Thank you all in the audience for being here. We've got a interesting meeting, to say the least, plus a presentation and a nice thank you from the city to some very important individuals within our community, and a thank you from our city to our community in general. So thank you all for being here. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lara.
Here.
Councilmember Clapp.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Present.
Mayor Blatz.
Here. And if we could have Mayor Pro Tem Strobel lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have two presentations this evening. The first presentation is from the Area Housing Authority, Doug Tapping, Executive Director. Welcome, Doug. Nice to see you.
Good to see you again. Good evening. My name is Douglas Tapking. I am the, thank you very much. These two, okay. I am the Executive Director for the Area Housing Authority of the County of Ventura. We are your housing authority. We have been a housing authority for you since the inception of the housing authority. Excuse me, there we go. And I'm pleased to be here tonight. I know many members of this council and have been around here for a number of years now. It's pleased to be back to see you all tonight, so thank you very much. I'd like to show you a quick presentation. Tonight we're hopeful that you will reappoint one of our members back to the board. So we thought we'd give you a quick idea of what we were. The Housing Authority was formed in '72. One of the things that I think you would like to know very specifically is you are a charter member of the Housing Authority. The County of Ventura, the City of Ojai, Simi Valley, and Thousand Oaks, you're all charter members. So you are the group that formed this and decided it was important to put together an organization that represented the entire area rather than having 15 or 7 or 8 different housing authorities that would be very small. And under the federal programs today, that would just be a complete disaster because of the way the funding is going. So fortunately, you were part of the group that put this together. There's a 15-member board. You have 2 members on that. They are here tonight. Jane McClenahan and Bill Painter. Jane has been a member since 1996. She took a little vacation for a few years, went away, did a little traveling, and then came back, and Bill Painter is on the board now. They are delightful members, and I'm not saying that because they're here. Oh, wait, maybe I am. But we find they are very helpful because they ask good questions, they understand what's going on, and much like what I watched on the earlier thing, if you don't understand, you ask questions, and it's very important. And they're both involved in the community, which is critical from our perspective. We ask that all of our board members become part of their community and understand what's going on. We want to be available. I had an opportunity to meet with some people outside tonight about a couple issues that are going on, which we will address tomorrow. So that's really, really helpful. In Ojai, for your information, 355 units of housing for us. You have our largest single public housing project, Whispering Oaks, 101 units. There are additional units that we own, 15 units throughout the area. The basic breakdown is elderly, disabled, and family, about 16%, 51, et cetera. We put about $1 million into Section 8 assistance for a little over 100 families in Ojai on a regular basis. On a monthly basis, the number of Section 8 residents that we provide assistance to, right around 100 every month. Sometimes it's 98, sometimes it's 110, depends upon how it goes. But it's been pretty straightforward along that line. These are the properties that we deal with. We have a 2-bedroom units on Grand Avenue. We purchased this in 2001. It rents up to 80%, so it deals with working families in this area. The other property is Summer Street, 10 one-bedroom units. 2-story units, a quiet complex, at least it was until I heard some information tonight. And again, 80%, they tend to be working families in the area. And then the largest project, the oldest project also, which is Whispering Oaks, 100 units and 1 two-bedroom unit. Whispering Oaks is 100% federally subsidized, which is both good news and bad news from the standpoint that the federal sequester issues affect our ability to continue to operate. Units like that, we can talk about that if necessary. We offer programs. We entered into certain agreements with you on pilot a little while back in which we take our payment in lieu of taxes and we run that into exclusively, in this particular point, into Ojai. And then funds on that vary based upon the amount of rent that we're able to collect as well as the utilities and what the federal government is willing to subsidize. Unfortunately, over the last year or so, they're not funding things at full level anymore. As a result of the sequester, the public housing program is down to about 84%. The Section 8 program is at 94% of subsidy and about 69% of administrative expenses. So as a city, you understand what those numbers mean when you're dealing with trying to provide all your services on a regular basis. However, the positive sides of this are we are 100% occupied. Both Summer Street and the Grand Avenue are 100% occupied. They've been that way for the last year. Whispering Oaks, the average rent, again 100% occupied, about $270 a month per tenant. Okay, those people earn no more than 50% of the area median income, and typically it's closer to 30% or under. Okay. We have 61 people currently on the waiting list for it, and we've had 2 units turn over in the last year. Extremely low turnover. The Area Housing Authority is also a 501c3 nonprofit, so we enjoy dual status both as a public agency, like the city, as well as a nonprofit. We serve 7 distinct jurisdictions, and we partner with agencies. And in Ojai, we partner with Help of Ojai, with Food Share, with Red Cross, with HICAP, which is a health insurance counseling program, the library, the Ojai Library, and the district attorney's office. And these have been very successful for us. On Whispering Oaks, in a couple of things that have happened because of some of the grant programs we've dealt with, we're going to be involved on some improvements for the driveway and the drainage programs for about $155,000. We're going to be putting in solar panels next year over here, which will provide electricity for all of the common areas and therefore reduce the cost on the property. We recently upgraded all the fire suppression and some of the sprinkling systems, about $500,000, and we've seen significant reductions in our water usage at Ojai. I know that's of significant concern to you. And we will be doing internal repairs for the rest of the year also. Now, next year, the feds have cut that program in half, so instead of $1 million, there'll only be about $400,000, which we kind of think will be the new normal, but that's kind of the way it is. Again, I said I would keep this short. Thank you very much. If you have questions, I would be pleased to answer them. If not, I would commend to you both Bill Painter and Jane McClenahan and look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Are there any questions of Mr. Tapking by the council?
Mayor Blatz,
Yes.
if the 2 representatives could just stand and be recognized, I'd
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your volunteerism.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Mr. Tapkin, before you sit down, I just wanted to, I still remember this and let the other council members know, if you haven't taken a tour of the Area Housing Authority projects around Ventura County, it's really inspiring. It's really impressive to see. So if you haven't had a tour, I bet if you call Mr. Tapkin, he would schedule one.
I would be pleased to do that. I'll leave some business cards with you. We pride ourselves on our work and our housing so that it doesn't look like public housing or anything else. And I think you would be very pleased to see this, as Carlin has indicated. Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Doug.
Council members.
Appreciate it. You're welcome to come back and see us anytime. The next item on our agenda, which is number 2, as far as our presentation, is a proclamation that we're going to be presenting to the Friends of Locally Owned Water, better known as FLOW. And I want to make a comment that there's many things that we do as council people and I do as mayor, or each of us as we serve as mayor, that gives us a lot of enjoyment, and one of them is this, and I get to do it twice because on Sunday we had a celebration in Libby Park, and it was nice to see as many people turn out there. But I also thought it was very important to do it as a more formal session here when people that are home watching television or didn't have an opportunity to are in the audience tonight to really get the flavor and the amount of really extreme appreciation we have to a group of 6 individuals that made up FLOW, and it's, or 7, excuse me, 7 individuals who made up FLOW, and who spent tireless hours getting the information out. And then, not to take anything away from them, but the community that we live in, how proud we all should be that we were willing to go to the polls on Measure V and actually turn out 87% in favor of putting a tax on ourselves just so that we can reduce our water rates and bring water back to Ojai and put the management of our water back with local people. And I think we all should really be extremely proud of our community for speaking with such a loud voice. I have the same proclamation that I read on Sunday that I'm going to read again tonight. I do want to point out the members of FLOW, and if any of you are there, I'd love for you to come up and stand up while I read the proclamation. Pat McPherson, who's here, I see, and he was, I believe, if there was a chair, you were it. Dale Hansen, you're here. Bob Daddy, you're here. Is Richard Hages here? No? Okay. I'll comment on the other members, Stan Green, Ryan Blatz, and Lou Torres. And I don't see any of them here. But they were there, everyone was there on Sunday, so I appreciate that. So, the other thing that I'd like to point out is that this is the same formal signed by, an original signed by all the council members that was presented to you on Sunday, and it is our intention to have 5 more of these done, and originals in the same format, all signed by us, that we would like to get to FLOW so that each of you can have your individual original copy. So that'll be coming up. So this is from the City of Ojai, and we sincerely want to say thank you. Ojai FLOW, Friends of Locally Owned Water, is hereby recognized for their outstanding efforts and vision in conceiving and facilitating the development of Bond Measure V, the laudable dedication of our community that has been exhibited by this group and the many committed volunteers who have worked with them for countless hours will bring about real positive change for the citizens of our valley. And I want to point out at this point in time that it really took a considerable amount of volunteerism to pull off the kind of election victory that you were able to set in motion. And I particularly want to thank Helen Connolly at the Ojai Valley Democratic Club, who I know for hours and hours spent on the phone banks and managing the phone banks. I was there, so were other members of our council were there working on, and that's no easy task. So I want to make sure we don't overlook those people as well. Some time ago, this group of concerned residents identified a troubling issue in our community, and together they developed a plan to solve the ever-increasing water rate problem that many Ojai residents have been faced with. Through their tireless efforts and community organization, Bond Measure V passed by an outstanding majority. The city, therefore, extends its expression of appreciation to Ojai FLOW for the invaluable service they have performed in their continuing crusade against unfair water rates and ownership of our natural resources by an uncaring corporate entity. It's dated the 10th day of September 2013, and it's been signed by each of the city council members. And I would like to present this to the 3 of you. And I just want to say from the entire council and from the deepest part of my heart, thank you very much for all the efforts you did.
Thank you.
And now, if any of you have any comments you'd like to make, feel free.
You're going to pass up a chance, Pat?
As I said on Sunday, this was not just Ojai Flow. We happened to be the catalyst for this. And we all stayed together, which is rather interesting to form a group of citizens that would remain together for 3.5 years until we accomplished our goal. And but it was really the citizens of Ojai that made this happen. And it wasn't any one thing, but what was strange, and it was interesting, up to the day of the election, people asked me, how's this going to come out? And I said, I don't know. Because there was no history to say you could look at this and you could look at this and you could forecast what was going to happen. But we all, and you could see on the day of the election, Ryan Blatz and his girlfriend went down the streets and it says, vote today, vote today. And we were at all the schools and people would come up and say, I forgot, today was the vote day. Thanks for reminding me. And we got such a fantastic turnout of 51%. And then an 87% in favor. And that's just amazing. So it's the community. It's Ojai. That's what we are. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Did either one of you want to say something as well? Bob?
Real quick. Part of this, as I've listened to the Planning Commission before he came, we talked about resources, our resources. And we talked about conservation, water conservation. In 1971, Golden State lost less water through their captive system than they lose today. 42 years of repairing leaks, and we lose more water today than we lost in 1971. I can't think of a better reason, because only 2 cities out of the 75 that Golden State serves, Clear Lake and Ojai, lose a full more than 10% of the water through the delivery system. And at 3,000 homes, just conserving that loss is enough to take care of those extra homes that we're going to eventually have to put up with the RHNA numbers. So other considerations rather than just dollars and cents, that's our water they're losing. And we don't get a chance to get that back, and we don't have a hose to state water. When that goes, it goes. And as you read in the paper 2 weeks ago, you see that Miners Oaks is on a stage 2 emergency. And we know that all the water companies are heavily buying from Casitas right now. So conservation was the other overbearing issue that we need to do this. Thank you very much for your support and your proclamations and your help. And again, we had 7 votes. We ended up getting more than 2,100. That's absolutely amazing for this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Dale, did you have anything you wanted to add? Anybody on the council that wants to make a comment?
Mayor Blatz, thank
Yes,
you.
Councilman Lara.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Smith, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, I must be more than 4 years ago that Richard Hages gave me a call and wanted to come over and talk about a possibility for changing water companies. And up to that point, we thought about it, but I was literally banging our heads over what can be done. And he came over, and he has a background in water. And he presented a plan to me that, I'm pretty rational, A, B, C. And there was suddenly reason for hope. And sure enough, we have passed now that first big hurdle. And my thanks to Richard for, number one, coming up with the overall picture of the plan, and then how we can actually carry this out. So well done, Richard.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman Clapp.
This is for Bob.
Bob came up to me right after the skate park, and he said, "Now I'm going to get a pool." And I said, "Good luck. How are you going to get a pool with the water prices what they are? Now what are you going to do?"
I'm going to fish.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to say a special thank you for all of the volunteers that were boots on the ground out there. I know Bill Miley left messages for me a couple of times, and I had people knocking on my door. So I know there was a tremendous groundswell of volunteers out there that were just invaluable with this process. And I'm so impressed with your victory. 87% is just amazing. Thank you.
And this is just the first, yes,
Mayor
Council.
Blatt, sorry to
Councilman Lara.
interrupt.
Yeah.
I just want, talking about troops, how do you convince football players to get up at 5:15 in the morning and put a door hanger on your door? That's what I want to know. Because I got woken up and I said, who's putting that? So thank you, though.
I might, did you have something else you wanted to say? Okay, I might add that this is just the first hurdle, but it's a very important hurdle. Without this one, nothing could move forward. And now the battle over the purchase price and several other legal issues come into play. But without this, without the approval of Measure B or Measure V, we certainly wouldn't be able to take it any further. So that's great. So thank you very much. And please be sure to pass on to Lou and to Richard and Stan and Ryan. Please pass on to them how much we appreciate it as well. I think we said it on Sunday, but you can't say it enough.
Thank you. Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
September 16th, we have our day in court. Golden State filed a lawsuit to prevent us from voting on this. It'll be down in the Ventura Center, so that'll be Monday, the 16th. It would be wonderful if we could have an overwhelming amount of people to explain to the judge and show the judge our support. So we need as many people as we can be there. The time and the court date will be on our Ojai Flow website, so everybody can go to that, and possibly we can have it put on the city council website so those people in TV land can check.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. All right, moving on. Are there any commission reports today? I don't see any commission chair out there. All right, so we'll move on to public communications. I do have a couple of cards, and public communications is a time on the city council's agenda when we're able to receive comments from the public. Due to the fact it's not a noticed type of comments that you'll be making, we are unable to take any kind of action on what you have to tell us other than for emergency items. However, if we feel strongly enough about it, we certainly will take it and ask staff to put it on a future agenda. So I have two speakers cards. The first one I have is from Paul Garth. Hello, Paul.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Mayor Blatz, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, council members and staff. Paul Garth, 609 Kenyatta Street, representing the Ojai Valley Triad, which is a cooperative between CERT, Ojai Valley CERT, Ojai Valley Amateur Radio Club, ham radio operators, and the Ojai Volunteers of the Ventura chapter of the American Red Cross. September is really by agreement, I'm not sure if it's FEMA, but by agreement it is the Emergency Preparedness Month nationwide. And how we show up in the Ojai Valley is with our 6th Ojai Valley OK drill, which is always by your proclamation, the 3rd Wednesday of every September at 7 p.m. Local time. And again, the 6th Ojai Valley OK drill. What this drill is a size up. It's simulating if there was a major emergency, Ojai Valley CERT, Ham Radio, Red Cross would pool their volunteers together to assist the fire department and the police department or the sheriff's department in finding out what happened where. It's not about search yet, it's not about rescue yet, it's about what happened where, and that's the size up. Second part is it's a dynamic communications exercise for the community and for the ham radio operators. It's a really good practice because we count and communicate within 1 hour the entire valley back to the police department as our local instant command. And it's also a great opportunity for the neighbors to actually prepare their plans, because CERT would love every day to just be, banging emergency preparedness every day, but in reality, it's one day a year, which is the third Wednesday of September. We will be distributing our signs, which are laminated in a yellow, with the OK sign and emergency preparedness information and the instructions at the Sunday Farmers Market. We get an amazing pool of people. I usually kind of speak to at least 1,200 people somehow on the Sunday Farmers Market, and also the City Hall chamber, the front desk. So we're asking people to do 4 things. Post the OK sign in a street-facing window, somewhere where volunteers can see it from the street. Check on their neighbors, see if they're home, talk to them. Review your plans, go through your emergency preparedness plans, out-of-state contact, do I have enough water, food, things like that. Tune into AM 1610. This is really important, AM 1610. Everybody in the valley should really check to see if they can reach that signal. And the whole point really of the neighbors doing this is that if all of them could think that for every action they do, the officials, like the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department, don't have to do something. That's really how palpable this is. The paper for the signs were provided by Ojai Valley CERT. The printing was done by Supervisor Steve Bennett's office, District Supervisor. And the lamination, we have a recurring grant from the Rotary Ojai West for the lamination. It makes it a much more permanent sign, responds well to the flashlight at night. And you can put holes in it, string it up, and it really works well. So thank you again for your attention and your proclamation.
Thank you, Paul. Any comments or questions by the council? No. Thank you. We
Right.
appreciate it.
And I have, I know I've done this several years in a row, but I'll give you your signs.
Thank you very much. And for anyone in the audience that needs one, I already have one, as many of us do. So if you need to get one, feel free to take mine. I have one other speaker's card from Deborah Pendry. Deborah?
Thank you, Mayor Blatz, council members. Deborah Pendry, 309 Riverside Road, Oakview, representing the Ojai Valley Green Coalition. As we shared with you in July, we started a 3-month program called Solarize Ojai Valley at that time, July 9th, and we're now 2 months into it. We've had up to date 31 leads come in, people who had an interest in solar and got an estimate. Unfortunately, to date, we've only had 3 close, but there's a month left, so we're really hoping that those 31 plus a lot more people in the community rally around this. We do have one more informational workshop. It's September 17th, which is a Tuesday at the Ojai Valley Grange Hall, and that is at 381 Cruceros Street, and that is from 7 to 8:30 p.m. So again, an informational workshop to find out about the program, find out about solar, and help you make a decision on whether you want to take that next step. It is about $1 less per watt than the going market rate, so that's a great savings. And as we know, the city and the county now are waiving their solar permit fee. Woohoo! Thank you.
Thank you.
And, that's $500, so we really appreciate that. You just jumped on that the minute you heard had to keep up with the county, so that was great, and we appreciate it. So I'd like to spend the rest of my time on commenting on the landscape ordinance draft language. At the last gathering, you ran out of time, so I might get 3 minutes officially, but nonetheless, the coalition is very interested in the landscape ordinance. As we know, residential usage of water is one of the smallest actual overall uses, but within residential usage, landscape is the largest, 50 to 70%, depending on what part of the country you're in. So in that respect, it is very significant. So we plan to read this and make official comment. We have several official experts, I would say, on water. So we hope to share and comment as this process goes along. And I don't know if you saw in the Sunday paper, California learning that the well will run dry. So like Tom Bostrom, that ordinance is all about water. And we can bet that there'll be more ordinances coming down from the state that'll be more stringent. So let's get ahead of the curve here. Might as well do it, because it has to be done. And our glass will be half empty some of the time, you know, it's just the way it is now, 21st century. But we can also look at our glass half full and how we think, rethink, rebuild our infrastructure and the way we use water and we think about water. So with that, I want to take off my Ojai Valley Green Coalition hat and put on my Citizen of the Planet Earth hat for just a moment and say, because one of the words that I heard we were talking about was the word onerous of the ordinance. And if we're using that word in the capacity of legal speak, engineer speak, you know, what's the regular resident layperson to do with this information? I totally get that. If we're talking more about inconvenience, sacrifice, I get prickly after 6 years of reading articles or just in everyday conversation, people using those types of words of what we have to do as citizens of the planet Earth and residents of this Ojai Valley. And I've thought long and hard about those two words and how to respond to people when they say that. And what I came up with, overly dramatic as I can usually be, is that to think about it in an inconvenience is if you have to walk 2 to 5 miles a day to get your water and your fire kindling. A sacrifice is if it's a child. And that happens on most of this planet. So we, citizens of the United States, who are 5% of the population, using 25% of the resources, have got to step up to the plate, get over it, and do the right thing for ourselves and the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I have a speaker's card from Dennis Leary.
Good evening. My remarks you may not consider to be directly city business, but at the end I'll apply it directly to Ojai. I want to talk about the relationship between global and local, and I'm going to take a current global situation which affects Ojai probably to the tune of millions of dollars a year. And one example only of that is the Syrian situation. My opinion, and based on my research, is that the government today is lying once again. It was the rebels who had the gas attack, and they've been supported for 2 years by the United States and its proxies. That's based on evidence. That's my interpretation. The government is lying again. They lied about 9/11, which was an inside job in which 3,000 citizens were killed by our own government without gas. We all know they were lying about the weapons of mass destruction in the Iraq deal. Why would the elites lie? Because their overall plan is world domination. And the elites hate Syria and similar nations for the following reasons, in my opinion. Syria has a state central bank. It runs its own currency. It gives out no interest loans. And this the elites hate. And they're willing to kill a country over it, as they killed individuals like Lincoln and JFK over currency. Syria has no international monetary fund debt. In other words, they're free. The elites hate this. They have to ensnare everybody. Syria will not allow GMOs or Monsanto things in their country for the health of the people. Monsanto type of corporations hate them for this, and they're willing to kill for it. Syria has a free media, unlike the United States, which is mostly propaganda. And the elites, once again, cannot allow free discussion. They can't prevent it either, but Syria has a huge supply of oil and gas. The elites want this, as they wanted the other countries that have it. Syria opposes Israel's genocide, and the U.S. backs Israel. So therefore, the elites hate Syria for that, because they're pro-Israel. Syria is a Muslim secular state, which means they do not believe in usury. Again, the elites hate this and are willing to kill over this issue. Syria does not want chain stores. They want their own identity. The elites want to turn this world into one big Walmart, McDonald's, and eventually a prison situation if they can. Now here's where it applies to Ojai for those who are willing to do this, and this is only one thing. Ojai citizens and the Ojai city can refuse to take interest on your money. Refuse to cooperate with the usury system. Don't have stocks, bonds, dividends. All that stuff is a toxic, terrible thing that's killing people, as Deborah just indicated. And secondly, don't vote Republican or Democrat. Both of these parties are liars, killers, war criminals. They belong in prison, not at the head of a government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Those are the only speakers cards I had for public communication. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us? All right, not seeing anything. We're going to go on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. And there are 4 items that I would like to pull from the consent calendar, either at my request or the request of one of the council people, or because I have a speaker's card from the audience on it. And that is item F, item H, item I, and item J.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
On item I would request that that be discussed separately and a separate vote.
Okay, that's fine. All right, item F. I pulled this off because we are having met and we're being asked to ratify the appointment of Jane McClanahan again as the city's representative to the Area Housing Authority Board of Commissioners for another 4-year term expiring October 31, 2017. And Mayor Pro Tem Strobel and I met with Jane, and we are bringing you an unanimous. Couldn't give a more lauding recommendation that we do that reappointment, and Jane is here tonight. If you'd like to come forward, Jane.
While Jane's coming forward, I'd just like to comment that the city of Ojai and the surrounding area is so fortunate to have someone of Jane's caliber and commitment representing us on the Area Housing Authority. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say personally thank you and the great work you're doing on the Area Housing Authority. It's time consuming. You're a volunteer, and thank you very much. And I wanted any of the other council people, if they had any questions to ask you, that you'd be available for that. Any questions of Jane? No? Thank you. Appreciate it. The next item is I think what I'll do is I would like to go to item number J, the Transit Occupancy Tax Audit Contract. And Mr. Clark, I had some questions on this that I'd like to raise that I didn't quite understand. It's the recommendation that we sign a consulting service contract with Moss, Levy, and Hartzheim to conduct these TOT audits. But I had a question on page 1-67, where it talks about a fee schedule. The audit fees per year for the audits are as follows. And as you can see, there's a list of various hotels in town. And is that an assessed cost for it?
That's the cost that we will pay the auditor to do the audit.
Okay. And then my other question is, why isn't the Ojai Valley Inn on the list?
So we did audit the Ojai Valley Inn several years ago, but we didn't audit all the other hotels. And so this cycle, we're proposing to audit the hotels that were not audited. And then in subsequent years, we will audit the Ojai Valley Inn and also anyone who had an audit problem this time that needs to be reviewed again in another year. I would say that we haven't done this as frequently as we should, and we will be doing it more frequently.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have any comments with regard to that audit, with that item about the audit contract? Any comments by council or any questions of Mr. Clark? Okay. The next item that I asked to be pulled is modification of the policies for granting administrative leave and providing employer contributions to employee medical insurance. This was the topic of many discussions of the council, and I thought that because it was a somewhat obscure or maybe confusing issue, that for the benefit of the public, we ought to pull it off the consent calendar and have Mr. Clark, if you would, give a basic understanding of what this really amounts to and why we feel it's important to compensate those salaried employees for the extra hours that they spend working for the city.
Sure. Mayor, members of the City Council, the management employees of the city are the department heads. And unlike other employees, the department heads are not paid for hours worked in addition to the normal workday. However, it's an industry standard practice to provide administrative leave, and typically that would be approximately 1 day per month, which is what we're proposing here. So we're proposing that management employees who are scheduled to work 5 days a week get that 1 day per month benefit, and that would be the maximum. I actually would grant up to that amount depending on my judgment as to how much time they've earned. It doesn't apply to those who work the 4-day work week because they get every Friday off, generally speaking, and so they would stand at the current 3 days that they have. And I think everybody who's on the management team believes that this is a fair process.
Okay. Any questions by the council of Mr. Clark? Any comments from the public on this particular agenda item? Mr. Miley.
Bill Miley, North Signal Street. I had several emails that I communicated with Mr. Clark on this. Excuse me. And maybe I just need a little better understanding of who is a 36-hour employee manager and why they don't get, if they go to meetings at night and spend more time than the 36 hours, shouldn't they have, as I asked Mr. Clark, similar kinds of administrative leave benefits? I just don't see the Friday as being a benefit for somebody who works 4 days because they don't work 5 days. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Clark, did you want to comment on it? And thank you, Bill. I received and I did review your emails, and I saw that Mr. Clark had responded to you as well, but I'll ask him to respond to you publicly.
I think what happened historically is when the city went to the 36-hour work week, all employees were paid 36 hours, and a decision was made about how to deal with time-off benefits. And it was determined that a fair way to deal with time-off benefits as it related to administrative leave for managers was to provide 3 days per month. And I do think from a recruitment and a retention standpoint that the 4-day work week has a very strong pull. It attracts people to us that might not otherwise apply, and it keeps people here that might otherwise move on. So I do think it's perceived as being a perk by those who are on that schedule. But again, those who we're moving to the 5-day work week, and that's the industry standard, and we're moving to the industry standard as far as administrative leave goes. Does that respond adequately?
It does.
Mayor
It does to
Blatz.
me. Yes, Councilman.
I think part of Mr. Miley's question, if I understood right, also is there any director working those 36 hours right now? And what the difference is between 36 and 40? Is that correct, Mr. Miley?
Yeah, well, the employees who are being paid 36 hours, they obviously work a lot more than that, are the deputy city manager and the recreation manager. And they're working 4 days per week and generally take Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off.
Yeah.
Hearing what Mr. Clark just said, Bill Miley, if a 36-hour manager goes to meetings at the nighttime, and a 40-hour manager goes to the same meeting, and they spend extra time equally, but the 40-hour person ends up getting 12 days a year, and I understand the 36-hour person gets 3 days a year. Is that correct? That's correct, okay. So I worked it out according to percentages, and the 40-hour person gets 5% of their hours roughly annually as an administrative leave, and the 36-hour person gets 1.5%. I just don't know why the 36-hour person isn't treated the same way as the 40-hour person, other than they seem to have 3 days of no work at the end of the week because they work 9 hours a day. So I don't know. So I just don't get even though I said okay to Mr. Clark, listening to what I hear now, it doesn't really make fairness sense.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Councilwoman Smith, do you have a comment?
I think there's a huge difference between having every Friday and Saturday and Sunday off and working 9 hours, true, it's 36, then working 5 days a week. But I really think if Mr. Miley, feels differently, that's his prerogative, and I think he should come in and talk more with the city manager about it. But it seems to be a perspective of the situation, opinion difference. But I also know that moving our new managers to a 5-day week is a huge disincentive to hiring quality managers, while the 4-day work was a huge incentive. But I feel we should be done with this, and I think any further, Mr. Miley has any more questions, he certainly is welcome to talk to Mr. Clark.
Any other comments by the council? All right. I have received a speaker's card on items K and M on the consent calendar. Item K is the Transportation Development Act, TDA, Article 3, bicycle/pedestrian funds. And item M is consulting agreement for the bicycle/pedestrian improvement services. And this card was submitted by Scott Eicher. So Scott, you wanted to comment on those two items?
Well, actually, it's a question, and maybe they aren't related as I think they are. But the item K talks about the pedestrian funds in the amount of $50,000, and M says we're going to hire a consultant and pay that consultant $66,000 to tell us, am I right on how to spend those $50,000 in funds? And I raised this question once before on something like this, and I apologize for not remembering the explanation you gave me that time, but it just kind of raised a question in my mind.
Well, we'll have Mr. Clark address that. Thank you, Scott.
They're two separate grants. So one grant is a $40,000 grant with a $10,000 match, and the other one is a $334,000 grant. So for different purposes.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Councilwoman Clapp.
Great grant again. He's amazing. The grant man. How do you do it? You're a magician. It's amazing. What's the total now? for you, grants that you've gotten us. 6 million, what? 6 million? You've lost count.
Well, thank you, Greg. All right, I'm going to bring this back to council for a motion on the consent calendar items A through H, and then J through M, excluding item I.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Latz?
Yes. All right, item I is the second amendment to the city manager's employment agreement. And I have 2 speakers cards on this, so I pulled it. And then there may be some comments by the council. So, Mr. Clark, do you have any comment that you'd like to make on this, or should I go right to the public? Okay. The first, it looks as though it says item 2 and 3. Bob Daddy, did you want to speak on this?
Not on this, item
Okay.
2 and 3 on
Okay.
the
All right.
housing element and the ombudsman.
Okay, thank you. Item I is Tim Dwyer. Tim?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Tim Dewar, 408A Bryant. Thank you for pulling this item. However, I'm at a decided disadvantage because I don't know what action you're going to take. The agenda merely states, approve the second amendment to the city manager employment agreement. And so you're obviously slated or recommended to approve something, but I don't know what that is. As I spoke last time, this item, or a similar item came up, I just wanted to reiterate that my feelings haven't changed. I still think Mr. Clark is a nice person. I don't believe that he's necessarily the right person for Ojai. I'd like to ask in the future if it might be possible that you take public comment after council discussion on items like this so that the public is able to comment on what you're actually going to do. A couple of the reasons behind this is obviously we've had discussions about problems in the planning department. Part of that will change with the resignation of Mr. Mullane. I, again, don't know. I assume that was voluntary. All indications are that it was. I guess I would have liked to have seen something more proactive and perhaps it not be voluntary. I think looking at a list of the people, of the applicants who have had problems in that department over the last couple of years, I came across something that was rather odd to me in that there seemed to be a very large percentage, in the neighborhood of 60 to 70%, of those who were minorities. May be a coincidence, may not, I don't know, but didn't seem like anything proactive until we started to really push. And I commend the council for taking the action that you did in providing that opportunity for applicants to appeal beyond the administrative decisions. But again, that was reactive rather than proactive. Same thing with Golden State. I still have serious doubts about the veracity of their claims in relation to the break on Grand Avenue that required the boil water notice. I would have liked to have seen the city lead a much harder push on getting that. I've since been told that you've changed the policy in relations to franchise agreements, but that again was reactive rather than proactive. The second unit compliance program that seems to be lagging, and just the overall economy at this point, I would hope that the council would seriously consider not taking any action on it at this time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on item I? I'll bring it back to council for comment.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes.
some comments.
Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
And just to address Mr. Doers, in the packet, the second page is the Second Amendment, which basically expands Mr. Clark's work week to a 40-hour work week. And speaking of the economy, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Clark for reducing our overhead cost here in the city at approximately, well, a little over $500,000. And I would also like to commend him for preparing a comprehensive budget that further accomplishes the goals and objectives that have been set forth by this council. I'd like to note that City Hall is now open 5 days a week. Mr. Clark is on a 40-hour work week, so he's here basically 5 days a week. I'd like to note that our recreation department has been totally reorganized. I've had many comments about how that's been an improvement. The changes, programs we have in place have all been well received by the community, and I've been getting comments to that effect. I also know that this past year we have managed to have approved the 1% TOT tax, transient occupancy tax, which will help us with our, is it TBID? TBID, I think. And the arcade maintenance assessment has been increased 25%, and so that's going to benefit the appearance of the downtown area. We've also been actually fortunate to be able to retain the trolley services, and we've extended in some areas, and we've been able to get Gold Coast to bring the bus back into downtown. So we're very fortunate. We've increased the fees, but the trolley service is so important to our citizens. And so I would like to commend Mr. Clark for working with the other agencies that was instrumental in our being able to keep the trolley. So thank you. I have talked with Mr. Clark about many issues that I personally wanted him to address. He has been responsive. He has kept me apprised of the status, progress of the issues that I've talked to him about. I've received quite a bit of public support for Mr. Clark's management. And for those that have related that, I want to say thank you. Overall, I think the city of Ojai has benefited from Mr. Clark's experience and his management. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments by council members?
I guess I would like to comment.
Yes, Councilman Lair.
I absolutely, from 6 months ago to this evaluation, I think the performance definitely has gotten a lot better. I think that you being able to listen and work with the agency is great. My thing is, my butt comes that it's been, I think, more of an interaction between citizens of Ojai that have also pushed the certain issues. And I think right now is not the appropriate time for a raise. And I know I've spoken to Mr. Clark about it, and it's nothing personal. It's just the way I feel as a council member. As right now, I can't support this, and I was hesitant to do it. And the more I think about it, it's not his necessarily his just his evaluation. Is just like, I feel as a city we have so much more that we could work on and we could expand. So that's my personal take, and I do appreciate the comments from the other council members, though, helping me understand where they're coming from.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to say I'm very uncomfortable evaluating our city manager at an open meeting. Evaluations are done of our city manager and our city attorney in closed session. You're welcome to share it, that you like them or not like it, but that much detail I really do not think is appropriate for an open session. So I'm concerned that city council adhere to protocols and don't necessarily share information that went on in a private in evaluation. If I was Mr. Clark, would be highly uncomfortable with this, and I'm not learning anything I didn't know. And I do not think that, especially, I think City Council Member Strobel was very general, but I think that City Council Member Laura, I do not approve of your statement in an open meeting. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yes,
I would just
Councilman.
respond, and I appreciate that, and I apologize if I offended Mr. Clark, and maybe I did give it too many information, but for the benefit of the public, I just want to be honest. Maybe this is a learning curve for me, but at the same time, I wanted to express my feelings to the public. So,
Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments, Councilwoman Clapp? Okay, and not having known how Councilman Lara perhaps would vote on this, I think it's important that if he is inclined to vote no on this particular item, I think it's important for the public to know why he's voting no. I also think that in the spirit of transparency, Mr. Clark is a highly visible public employee who has a great deal of responsibility in our city. And I think our citizens who communicate to us with regard to Mr. Clark and citizens seeing on TV have the right to have whatever we're doing with regard to the most prominent, important city official being evaluated in an amendment being done to his contract. I think we owe it to the community to openly discuss it, not from a standpoint of anything of any private nature, but certainly if Mayor Pro Tem Strobel has some reasons for which she believes that Mr. Clark is doing a good job, as do I, and I mirror her comments and even add one where working as the chairman of the successor agency to the redevelopment agency in which Mr. Clark acts as the staff member, he has done an extraordinarily amount of work, extraordinary hard time, trying to keep this city $5.2 million that has been taken in our incremental taxes. And I can tell you, it was hours of work. And it's not just dealing with the state, but it's also dealing with our board, which is made up of a diverse group of individuals that needed, very detailed explanations about the interest rates and things like that. The other thing is that I truly believe that Mr. Clark has brought a particular expertise to the budgeting process, and where he has specifically brought his years of expertise to the fact that now we have set-aside funds, which was sorely needed as far as our street maintenance program, which we've neglected over the years. And now we're putting money aside for that and still operating the city as a balanced budget. So I'm very pleased with what he has done. Can there always be things that people can look at us as council or Mr. Clark as an individual is in the capacity of city manager or community development director? Sure, they can always find something that they want to nitpick about, but that's part of our jobs. But I can assure you that this particular council person, and acting as this year's mayor, and having had more interaction with Mr. Clark this year than ever before, I can tell you we are being very well served by Mr. Clark. Any other comments by council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'll go ahead and talk.
Yes, okay.
I figure all five of us might as well weigh in on it. For me, in the budget process, my discomfort has been in raises all the way across the board. So I felt at this time in the economy, with our citizens struggling with mortgages, struggling to pay for their gas, for putting their automobile, struggling for medical insurance, that don't have a lot of the benefits of a public employee, when I see our community that is not a wealthy community struggling. I have a hard time with any pay raises overall with any public sector. Not that people don't deserve to be paid better. Everybody does. We have suppressed wages in this country all the way around, and we're all suffering from that. But for me, fundamentally, I've opposed any pay raises in this budget cycle, so I will also be opposing, not because of lack of performance, because I think Mr. Clark has, and I've been hard on him, believe me. I've been, I've been really hard on him. But I got to say that as time has gone on, I think that I've seen a huge change in my relationship with him, and I think he's helped me understand the city process better, and he has also been real supportive of things in this city that we've wanted to do, and he's helped us get it done. So it's not any feeling on my part that he is not doing a good job and doing a better job every day as he gets to understand our community. And that's a task in and of itself. It's getting to understand this community, because we really are special. We're special. But so that is my position on the matter.
Any other comments by council? Councilwoman Smith?
No, I'm just ready to make a motion. On item I, approve the Second Amendment to the city manager employment agreement.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
No.
Clapp?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. All right, moving on. We don't have any public hearings this evening, but we do have one discussion item, which is a very important one, and that's the 2014 to 2021 housing element update. Mr. Clark?
Thank you. As you know, we spent years and years and years working on the fourth cycle housing element, and now we're going to spend about 5 minutes on the fifth cycle. But that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. But I think that the council and the planning commission and the community, as they went through the fourth cycle, really did an in-depth job addressing the various housing issues that we need to deal with in order to respond to this state mandate. And so there's really only a few changes of course in here that we kind of all knew and had telegraphed during the fourth round that we needed to deal with in the fifth round, especially the height of buildings, and that is being addressed here. So John Douglas, our housing consultant, is here. He's going to make a presentation to you, and then we'll go from there.
Welcome, Mr. Douglas.
I haven't met you yet, Mr. Douglas.
We'll find out if I remember. Good evening, Mayor Blatz and council members. Just taking off from where the city manager introduced us. We're about midway through this process, and as Mr. Clark mentioned, we're spending a short time on this compared to the last time. The heavy lifting has been done. In July, we kicked off this process with your study session with the Planning Commission. We got some good discussion, some good feedback. Last month, the Planning Commission met to review the draft document, which is in your packet. At that meeting, we got, again, good discussion, good feedback, and some suggestions to tweak, fine-tune the document. So I'm here tonight to just give you a quick overview and then a little bit of highlighting of the specifics that we believe are the biggest issues as we go forward. Okay, tell me. Point it at the screen.
Left and right button.
Left and right button. There we go. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to go quickly through the entire document, just very briefly, give you an overview of what the entire document is, and then I'm going to talk about some of the specific issues in a little bit more detail. The First chapter of this document is the introduction, doesn't contain any sensitive policy issues, just gives an overview of the entire document. The second chapter is very lengthy, has a lot of information in there about demographics and characteristics, all of which has been updated because we have new census data and a variety of other sources that have a completely new set of information about the community, its housing conditions, and its growth needs. The most important aspect of Chapter 2, the needs assessment from a policy standpoint, is the new growth needs from the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. In the fourth cycle, the document that was adopted last year covered the time frame 2008 to 2014. The city was allocated by SCAG a growth need of 433 units, which you are familiar with, and of that, 164 units was in the very low and low income segments. In the new period, what's referred to as the fifth cycle, which goes from this year to 2021, it's an 8-year period, the city's growth need allocation has reduced a bit to a total of 371 units, of which 146 are in those very low and low categories. Why the very low and low is important is because, as you'll recall from the last cycle, under state law, high density is required in order to satisfy that portion of the need. And high density in the context of smaller communities like Ojai means 20 units per acre. And so you recall the SPL overlay that was required to allow 20 units per acre. So that's the importance of that very low and low portion of the city's total need. This chart shows the breakdown of those RHNA numbers by income category, shows the number of units in each of the income segments, and also what income actually corresponds to the different names. So for example, when I use the term low income in the context of the housing element, that means family of 4 with an income of up to $71,000 a year. And those income limits are adjusted based on the family size. Chapter 3 of the document is talking about resources. And in the terminology of housing elements, the word resources has a little bit different meaning than we normally think of when we hear resources, because normally when we're talking about planning issues, resources means things like air quality and water and so forth. But in the context of the housing element, what state law is looking at for resources is things that can facilitate the production of housing, resources that can be brought to the table to help that process. And those primarily are the availability of land where housing can be built, and also administrative resources such as the assistance that the city can provide to developers, especially nonprofits, to facilitate the production of affordable housing, and also financing sources from the federal government, the state government. Earlier tonight, we heard the presentation from the Area Housing Authority. That's a huge source of resources that can assist the city in meeting its housing needs. And then we also talk about energy conservation in this section of the document. The constraints chapter looks at both governmental and non-governmental constraints, with constraints being things that could inhibit the production of housing, and especially housing in the affordable end of the range. So under governmental constraints, this chapter talks mostly about the city's regulatory documents, such as the general plan, zoning regulations, and so forth. It also includes things like fees, development fees, permit processing fees, permit procedures, how long does it take for a project to get through the process to get their building permits, and so forth. All of those things could pose constraints to development, and so we need to make sure that they are reasonable and they don't go across the line and pose unreasonable constraints. Then this chapter also talks about non-governmental constraints, infrastructure, environmental, and so forth. And of course, very prominent in this, within this topic is things like water supply that are always big issues in Ojai. Things like transportation capacity. Also economic things like the cost of land and so forth. Okay, so with that quick overview, now let me get into a little bit more detail. Chapter 5 of this document is the Housing Action Plan. This is the part of the document that says what the city is going to do to address its needs and address its issues. And so many of the programs that are in this chapter are a continuation of things from the prior housing element that are still appropriate, working well. But some of them we want to fine-tune based on city policy, change circumstances, and so forth. So the first program that I wanted to talk about was in the previous housing element, and it has to do with the issue of the general plan update. Now, why I think this is especially important is because there's been a lot of discussion about how infrastructure and resource in the term, the conventional term, water supply and so forth, how does that relate to the housing element? And so the way housing element law works, the state legislature has decided that they don't want resource issues to be the thing that stops housing development. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Let me say that again. They don't want city regulations and plans to be the thing that stops housing development. And so through the RHNA process, starts at the state level, works down through the regional SCAG and so forth. Each city is assigned a fair share. Most cities don't agree with the fair share that has been assigned to them, but it is a process. And so once that process runs its course, and once SCAG adopts fair share numbers, there is literally nothing that can be done about that. The only, as I was waiting for this item to come up, I was thinking, are there any circumstances at all whereby a city's RHNA numbers could be changed at this stage of the game? And I thought of two. One is annexation. If a city annexes unincorporated territory, its RHNA numbers typically go up because it gets a share of the county. The other would be disincorporation, where a city reverts back to unincorporated land, and so then, of course, city doesn't exist, its RHNA goes away. Short of those kinds of things, the RHNA is really chiseled in stone, can't be changed. And this has been tested in court just within the last few years. So, why I think that background is relevant is that because we can't change this RHNA and we're locked into it, it's very important for the city to work with the regional government, SCAG, to try to make sure that the future growth forecast and the future RHNA accurately reflects the city's constraints, such as transportation, such as water, and so forth. And so there, as a policy matter, this program says that the city is going to work closely with SCAG to make sure that all of that information is brought into the growth forecasting process so that the next RHNA and the RHNA after that more accurately reflects the city's real capacity. The second program that I want to talk about is the SPL overlay. Hours and hours of discussion and analysis went into that last time, as you well recall. The main thing that I understand the city wants to accomplish in this new housing element cycle is to get concurrence from the state that the SPL overlay and affordable housing can be accommodated within a two-story building envelope. And so I think that that is a very reasonable request on the city's part, and so we have put language into the housing element that expresses the city's intent to move forward on a two-story height limit within the SPL. And so that language is reflected in program number 6 in the housing element and elsewhere in the element as well. One of the attachments of your staff report package shows some revisions to the discussion of height limits in the city. The proposed commercial mixed-use overlay program is a new program that was discussed in your previous housing element. So that is a policy expression in this document that, that says that the city, over the course of this new planning period, will look at establishing a new commercial mixed-use overlay to help stimulate the redevelopment of underutilized properties. It's important to recognize that because this is such a fast-moving process and the deadline for adopting the new housing element is just a few months away, the details that show up in zoning regulations, we probably don't have time to work out all of those details on the same time frame as the housing element. And so just as you had a two-step process in the previous cycle where you adopted your housing element and then you came back and worked out the details of the SPL and several other code amendments, that's the process that we're suggesting with this new housing element. So it's sufficient for purposes of the housing element to express the City Council's intent to move forward in the next months and year or so in establishing the detailed zoning regulations that would apply to this new commercial mixed-use overlay. With regard to second units, again, a lot of discussion about the amnesty program, compliance program. One of the suggestions that came out of the Planning Commission workshop a few weeks ago was that the city should try to encourage not only the conversion of existing second units that don't comply with code, but also a two-pronged strategy so that we want to stimulate new second units. So this language has been revised to include both strategies, stimulating new second unit development as well as bringing existing units up to code and getting credit for those. Inclusionary housing was mentioned in the previous housing element, but as we've discussed at previous meetings, this topic has been in a state of legal flux because there have been some court cases in recent years calling into question cities' abilities to impose inclusionary requirements. Actually, there was a bill passed by the legislature just within the last week that's now on the governor's desk that would give cities the legal authority to establish inclusionary housing programs, again, for both rental and for sale. And so the program that's in the housing element expresses the city's intent to move forward with an inclusionary ordinance, but the devil's in the details, and so there's a lot of nitty-gritty details that would need to be sorted out as part of that ordinance. And so, again, that's a phase 2 thing that the housing element would establish the general policy framework, and then the details would be sorted out as part of the ordinance. So the next steps in this process, we have a draft document that's before you tonight. It has some suggested revisions based on public discussion and Planning Commission feedback a few weeks ago. So what we're asking you tonight is to give us any changes that you feel are appropriate, and then authorize us to send this document up to state HCD for review. Under state law, we are required to submit every housing element update to the state. They get 60 days to review it, comes back with their comments, and then we would adjust, answer questions, whatever's necessary to address their concerns, and then schedule public hearings for adoption with the Planning Commission and back to your council. So that concludes my formal presentation. This is a workshop. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by the council? Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
Some clarification. In the draft document, on page 39 of the document, at the top of the page, it had the last part of the last sentence mentions a 25-foot height limit would not pose an unreasonable constraint to meeting the city's affordable housing need. 25-foot height limit. In another section of this document, it stated that 2 stories would not impose an unnecessary constraint that we could accommodate. So is the 25-foot height in one situation and the 2-story in another situation, or are we looking at either or an option? Why do we mention both in here?
I think that it might be more appropriate in that sentence to say a two-story height limit rather than 25 feet, because...
That's my question, is what
Yes.
we're actually proposing a two-story as opposed to 25-foot height?
I'd like to point out that we have proposed some different language for this particular section in attachment E, because I felt that it sort of stood out to have a chart that showed 30 feet for all the other residential zones and 25 for the overlay zone. And so if you look at attachment E, we've reworded it and said 2 stories in all those places, but we didn't say 2 stories where the 25-foot was. We actually put some languages in talking about potential revisions to the 30-foot. So we might want to look at that for fine-tuning purposes.
Any other comments by the council?
I have a quick question. This is kind of, sort of an aside, but it's maybe you can help me understand water a little better. Because we do not have access to outside water sources. Our water is purely from Casitas or from groundwater. And interestingly enough, 87% of our water is from water wells here. And then we supplement from Casitas. And one of the things on page 47 at the top, it says that the EIR, it was prepared in 2002, concluded that the anticipated water supplies are adequate to serve the projected level of growth. The projected level of growth is somewhere in this document. But the next sentence is where I have my question. It says, however, continuation of the current drought could result in the need for additional measures to ensure adequate domestic water supply. And the question I have is where it says need for additional measures. One thing that I am concerned about is that I have heard that residences take precedence over agriculture. So in the east end of the valley, they're in the county, but they're dependent on this very same limited water supply that we have. And if our policy implementing RENA causes us to have to take water, enough water that we take it from ag, are we allowed to negatively impact a neighboring community's ability to earn a living in the course of implementing RENA? Because they have nowhere else to get the water.
Yeah, and I think the best answer that I can give is that housing element law does not mandate the issuance of building permits. A housing element is a planning tool. There are a variety of regulations that govern the issuance of building permits, will serve letters, and so forth. So I think it's important to keep that context in mind, and this general plan housing element is a policy document. It expresses policy, but it doesn't regulate development. Zoning regulates development, and other kinds of regulations establish when building permits could be issued. So to come back to something I said earlier, what state law says is that cities are required to plan for the amount of new housing need that they've been assigned through that process. Doesn't mean the city has to issue building permits or
How
transfer.
can we say, no, pardon me though,
Yes.
but we can't say no if the water's there, right? If there's enough water, if we take it from the east end, if there's enough water, then they lose the water, we get the water, and they can't farm, right? Doesn't the state say that if you're going to do a development of an affordable housing project in this town, and a developer comes in and says he wants to do it, I know we don't have to do it. He comes in, he says, all right, I want to put a project on this SPL here. But we find that in order for him to do that, he has to take enough water from the east end, whose wells are dry incidentally right now. They're buying water from Casitas. Does a developer get to develop those properties if they are taking from a neighboring community and destroying their economy? Or is this something that's going to have to be addressed in a court of law? Because we are an unusual community in that we have only a single source of water. So maybe it just hasn't been tested. Maybe at some point it'll have to be tested.
Maybe so. And there is a state law that's within the housing body of state law that says that water purveyors have to grant priority to affordable housing
Right.
projects.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's what you're referring to.
That's my question.
Yes, and so,
So if if they took so much water that it caused their wells to go dry, tough luck for them, right?
yes, and I'm not an expert on water law, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I think if you, the water law is very complex.
It is complicated. I don't think this has been tested, actually. And I hope we already pushed the envelope in this town. I hope we don't have to. But that, to me, I think the public needs to understand that is the fact of the matter, is that these projects do have precedence over our agricultural water. If they have to take it from ag to do it, they take it from ag to do it, and the east end could go dry.
Yeah, Councilwoman Smith?
I think, and Mr. Douglas, tell me if I'm correct, if our water purveyors say there is a problem with water, then the first range of numbers that go will be the high income and the moderate income. And so that, in other words, if, let's say, what's our total for this cycle that we're supposed to?
370 some.
So it's 307, so let's say we took off 100 of that, so we would have.
371.
So 371, so if we took off 100 that were in the high income or middle income, then we would only need, then rain number would drop to well, we would have to just apply planning possibilities for the low and very low income. Am I wrong? What happens if our water purveyor said, no, we cannot give you this water without affecting the wells?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I could join in. I think it's a point that Mr. Douglas raised earlier. This is a planning document, and we're really bound by the projections and data and information we get from the water purveyors, which is currently there is capacity to serve. Before a developer can connect, they have to get a will serve letter, and it's possible that, and someday it's going to be Casitas will be the water purveyor for the entire area. They may have to put a hookup moratorium in place because of inadequate water. That's on the implementation stage, and of course, then we can't issue a building permit if connections can't be made. So really the issue of allocation of the water is both from a regulatory standpoint really is in the hands of the water purveyors. And then we follow that process. So since we don't issue, we're not a water purveyor. So the issue we're still developing a plan, and the plan is supposed to live over, for an 8-year period. There's going to be hopefully fluctuations and hopefully growth in the amount of water. So that this, from a planning standpoint, we're using good planning data at the implementation stage, just like we have to adopt local ordinances to implement some of this. At the hookup stage, there may be situations where they can't get service, where they can't serve everybody. Then it's up to Golden State and Casitas, whoever's the water purveyor, to comply with state law about who gets the permit. And this has happened. This has been tested up on the farther north and central coast. In Monterey County, they've had issues, long-standing moratoria on new water meters and things like that, where there's a struggle between agricultural and residential. But my understanding is in this valley that it may become an issue, but that's regulated by the water agencies, not by us as the land use agency.
But could a developer say, wait a minute, this is an affordable housing project, and the state says that you have to give up the ag water.
Right, then that
so
would
then
be.
it could go over and above the water purveyor at
Well,
that
I mean,
point.
they would actually then bring some sort of action against the water purveyor to order an issuance of a will serve letter.
Right.
But we don't have jurisdiction over that.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. But that's
But it shows you the complexity of the situation we're dealing with.
Yes.
Well, it reminds me of we have no control over the fact that look at the farmers in the San Joaquin Valley that couldn't farm because the water was cut off because of the spotted salamander. I mean, the state said we're not going to send you water, and hundreds of thousands of acres went without water because they didn't have it. And we're faced with somewhat the same thing with the state mandate of having to look after ourselves in affordable housing. And if it affects agriculture, it affects agriculture. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, as much in favor as I am of affordable housing, you can't really do that at the expense of somebody's livelihood, I don't think.
No, but that's, somehow I thought, though, if RENA somehow agreed that if our water constraints cannot meet 376, planning for 376, if our water constraints were such that they said, no, we could only accommodate 211, then our RENA number would be dropped. Or they'd say, therefore, the only building will serve letters that will be issued will be either for very low or low income units. That's totally wrong.
Mr.
Yes, let's wait for an answer. I don't think that's the case. I think you
I
have
could
to
be
plan
wrong.
for it, and then, the process of issuing permits and will serve letters and everything else is the one that would cause there to be a constraint on additional housing, I think. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mayor Pro Tem Strobel?
At this point in time, Golden State has said, and they've prepared a 5-year plan that states they are able to provide the water. And so as long as they say as long as Golden State says it can provide the water, it is not a constraint for RENA. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, any other further questions? All right, I've got some public speakers cards. The first one is Bob Daddy.
Just to correct or to set the record straight on Golden State, they can't provide water for us today. So the water they're providing us today is not all theirs. They are buying heavily from the lake. And so for them to be able to say, we can provide you water for the next 100 years is ludicrous. And they will truck it in, and the price will be astronomical. Now you got me way off topic. That's not what I wanted to talk about at all.
That, because that's, when you said you wanted to correct the record, I want to correct your correction.
Yes, ma'am.
Golden State Water says it can provide the water. How they do it is another matter.
As long as they can do it. I guess what I wanted to talk about, which has escaped me now, has to do with this part of the housing cycle. I want to make sure that when we get into this amnesty, that we're really dedicated and we're going to be very proactive and we're going to make sure we get this thing done. One of the things that concerns me is for years we put up what I think are artificial, unnecessary roadblocks. The state says you can have a 1,200 square foot second unit. Ojai says 640. The state says this, we say this. The state says that, we say that. When somebody builds a 640 square foot unit like Mr. Ford did, and your fees are $40,000, it makes it prohibitive. I think we need to go back and take a look at some of our issues and incentivize these things, because it's much more affordable on the scale of 800 or 900 or 1,000 square feet. Now, I have a neighbor that lives across the street from me. He's got very high, it's an ultra-large lot, 14 square feet. For some reason, we have a crazy rule that he can't build a 640 square foot. He has to build a 1,000 square foot minimum. Doesn't really want to go that big. We have rules stuck in our records that are just unworkable for us. And I would hope that we could get our planning commission to take a look at these areas that we can look at that deviate from the state of California, that we have homegrown for ourselves, and go back and see if they really fit these rules that we need to protect ourselves, because we've really protected ourselves too much from ourselves. And we have a number of very, very, very ultra-large lots here that can use some development. And they can use a little bit more. We could probably go to some of these little split units or zero units where we could get 2 for 1 in some of these areas and look at some zoning. Again, the numbers from the prior administration were around 600 non-permitted units. Now we're saying around 300. Numbers probably closer to 1,000. We need to figure out what we really want to do, and I would urge the city to go back and do 2 things. Judy Murphy, Mr. Miley, and I spent some time with the Casitas general manager talking about the protocol and how things are going to fall. Critical that you understand that. Talk to them, let them tell you. We're not going to regurgitate it, I'm not. The next thing is the sanitary district. They're going to do their own things here, and it is going to have a dramatic effect on what we do in the city. And I think we need to go back and talk to those 2 other entities that are going to be our partners in getting these units built and getting these amnesty things through. Because you're going to be in there. We have 58 people that have spent in excess of $15,000 to get sanitary permits, and we've not taken advantage of permitting any of those for our RANA numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Judy Murphy. Good evening, Judy.
Good evening.
Doesn't matter.
Mayor Blatz, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, council members and staff. I am Judy Murphy. I live at 218A Grand Avenue in Ojai, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Ojai Valley Democrats regarding the new housing element cycle. While we agree with much of the report, we come tonight to ask you for action in some specific areas as we move toward implementation. First, the second unit amnesty program, which was adopted last year during Cycle 4, and it is reiterated in this draft, specifies an ombudsman program to assist the applicants. Nearly a half a year has gone by, and we still don't have those ombudsmen. I hear we're close, but we don't have a policy, although I understand that it is being worked on now. We don't have a public relations campaign, which we will need in order to get the public up to date on what it is we're trying to accomplish. This program is scheduled to end next June 30th. That's not very much time. So we're asking you to extend the program by 2 years. Construction of affordable housing is the next item. With our shrinking demographics, population, jobs, especially the schools population, we ask you to assign the highest priority to being concerned about affordable housing, especially rental housing. The RHNA numbers include 155 market-priced houses. Well, developers, people who can afford market-priced housing, can worry about that. We ask you to bring affordable housing, 100% affordable housing, to Ojai. What we need are more young families in Ojai. We need them to be able to live here with their children and go to Ojai schools. They can't do it now. So we would like you to formulate partnerships with nonprofit developers, locate some grant money, utilize the state tax breaks, and use city-owned property to make an 100% affordable housing project feasible.
If we're going to build something here in Ojai, especially with all of our water and transportation problems, we really should make sure it's what Ojai needs. And the last item is resource constraints. We've been talking tonight a lot about water, which we're very concerned about, and roadway capacity. And that has been singled out for study in this draft plan. We're asking Ojai to take the initiative to get the various relevant agencies together. Don't just say that's their job, or we can't do it, the responsibility is over there. We need to get people around the table and develop a hydrological model, an interagency watershed management plan for the whole Ventura River watershed, so that Ojai, when you start dealing with the implementation of the housing plan, you have an accurate assessment of the supply and demand of the water. We don't have that right now. We also ask you to work with Caltrans and the County of Ventura to conduct new traffic counts and to create a model of transportation for the entirety of Highway 33. These studies are critical for growth management, and they're not going to happen unless we push for them. The last item is we think that the public would really benefit if the housing element plan had an executive summary that was written without technical jargon. You know, 6 months ago when I jumped in with both feet, I looked at poor Bob Daddy and said, "What's RENA?" It is very complex, this subject we're discussing tonight, and I don't think that we can expect the public to understand what our issues are if we haven't made it pretty clear for them in very plain language. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. My next speaker card is from Bill Miley. And Bill, I've got a couple speakers cards. You want to talk about water first, so why don't you go ahead and do that?
Excuse me. Thank you. Bill Miley, North Signal Street. I have a what might be considered a historical document I'd like to read to you. It's from Jim Roush. It's one of the last things he publicly wrote. This came from Rodney Green a number of years ago, and I'd like to read it because it's quite relevant. You all remember Jim Roush? Yes. Okay. For the public, Jim Roush was a rancher here in Ojai, but prior to that, he had been the resource director for the state of Colorado, and also was legally approved to talk about water in a court of law. And we always like to hear from him. So this is what he said in May of 2008. Does the city of Ojai know enough about the availability of water to approve a housing element, we were dealing with cycle 4 or 3 or something like that, okay, that facilitates an increase in the rate of housing growth in Ojai? The answer in his mind is clearly no. Most of the water for household use in the city of Ojai comes from wells in the Ojai groundwater basin, pumped and delivered by Golden State. This basin also supplies the needs of agriculture and residents in the eastern end of the valley. The Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency, with representatives from both the city, Golden State, and its board of directors, expresses serious concern in its 2007 management plan update about the water supply in the basin and the entire Ventura River watershed being sufficient to meet existing demand in the likely event of an extended drought. Not only does the Basin Agency supersede the Golden State Water Urban Management Plan, but Golden State Plan is fatally flawed in 2 respects, both of which were pointed out to Golden State by the city of Ojai and the Basin Agency representatives at the time. The flaws are, 1, the assertion that Golden West will be able to Golden State, will be able to pump enough water to meet demand in a drought within the estimated safe yield of the basin is inaccurate. It is based upon the erroneous assumption that while Golden State demand will increase, no other well owners in the basin will increase pumping. This is not true. Already, because of the increased cost of Casitas water at that time, additional wells are being drilled in the basin. It's likely that water users who have both wells and Casitas water will depend more heavily on wells where possible for economic reasons. And Council Member Clapp talked about the basin in the east end, and the wells are getting deeper and deeper for the pumping or drying up. 2, the assertion that in the event of a drought or other contingencies, Casitas will be able to supply whatever additional water Golden State needs is inaccurate. I attended her board meeting, the basin board meeting, and I heard that all the water providers are buying at least 30% of their water from Casitas right now, probably more than ever. The Golden State Plan states, Casitas has indicated that the supply, this was in 2007, supply to Golden State system, the Ojai system, will be 100% reliable into the year 2030 in all hydrological conditions. This statement is not consistent with Casitas' projections about the availability of water, particularly in a drought period. Supply limit is unknown. Jim continues to say, the fact is that reliability of available water to meet the needs of existing users in the entire Ventura River watershed is unknown. And I think a lot of you know that, or maybe some of you know that, Casitas provides water to Ventura all the way to Mills Road. Concern about limits of that supply has led to the initiation of the Ventura River Watershed Planning Project, and that has been going on, and we think that it's, and it was to be finished sometime in the next few years, and I'm not quite sure what year it was. The initial information being developed by that project will not be available until, okay. We do not and cannot, under any economically reasonable scenario, import any water into the watershed. We're dependent totally on rainfall and the storage in the basin and Lake Casitas. We use the water for essentially 3 purposes: agricultural, manufacturing and industry, municipal and industry, which includes domestic use, and environmental purposes for maintaining flows in the Ventura River for fish, at least part of the time. Based upon what we know today, increasing the amount of water used by any one of those 3 will probably result in a loss to one or both of the other 2. Under these circumstances, it does not seem to make sense to institute growth-inducing measures for any water use in the watershed until we have completed watershed plans and have a better understanding of the impact of such growth. At the very least, the City of Ojai should do its best to assure that, in its effort to find ways to increase affordable housing, any housing increase will be allowed only under the condition that it cause no net increase in water use in the valley. Thank you, Jim Rouge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miley. I think that the comments there are very true. I'm just not sure what we can do about it. That's the
And
problem.
Mr. Mayor, I would
Yes.
like, I'm going to start a new program. I'm going to say this over and over and over and over and over. As long as our water purveyor, in this instance is Golden State Water, says they can serve, the City of Ojai cannot use that as a constraint to hold down our rain numbers. I agree with you. No, I agree with you. I think we're with this drought, we're going to be in tremendous trouble. That doesn't change the fact that Golden State says it can serve. Therefore, we cannot use it as a constraint.
And it's, if there was a process we could go through that we could demonstrate that whatever Golden State is saying with regard to the ability to provide water was flawed, and then we could get the state to change our reign and number based on that, then that would be an excellent argument. But there just is no process for that. And the process would actually happen, and perhaps the argument could be made at a time when a project was actually coming forward, and we had to say, no, there's not enough water for this project. The thing that I find most frustrating about the whole process of our housing element is that it's all hypothetical. It's hypothetical in that it has to put forward a plan to allow for these number of houses, but you never have to allow for them. And you don't have to do it. The housing element says, as long as you've made the availability of it for both regular type houses and the low income houses, then, or housing, then the state's happy. And if somebody were to come forward with a project and there was enough water for that project could be denied. And who knows when that project would come forward or if that project comes forward. So what we're doing is we're going through the motions to make the state happy with really no definitive plans to do whatever may come forward. That's the process. That's the frustrating part about it. It'd be very easy to look at a situation and say, well, they're telling us we have to do this. And then we can say we can't do this because we don't have enough water. Water is in jeopardy. But it's all hypothetical, and they don't ask us to say, well, hypothetically, if this were to be built out 3 years from now, not knowing what's going to happen in the next 3 years when it comes to groundwater and rain and everything else, we're not going to have enough water for this. And it's like looking into a crystal ball. Yes?
We always talk about how we don't have to build it, but we have to zone for it to be built. And if somebody wants to build it, they can. So we can't, it is a land use document. It isn't all just fantasy. It is a land use document. It is zoned for these certain purposes. And if somebody comes in and wants to do it, we can't tell them no. Somebody comes in and says they want to build a project on an SPL, we can't say no unless we don't get a will serve letter.
That's correct.
So it isn't just all hypothetical. It is a land use document.
It's a land use document that may or may not ever come into fruition.
Right.
And it's a land use document in which, yes, but we want to plan for those low-income houses. We need to plan for those low-income houses. We want those low-income houses to be built. The question is, do we have the resources to do it? And if we don't have them at the time it's going to be built, I think that's the time we need to argue about this. But now we're kind of just doing it as a planning process with the assumption that there will be enough water. And if there's not enough water at the time, then we're going to have to deal with it then. But I think we're spinning our wheels, arguing in circles, knowing that it's in the best interest of this community to build as many affordable houses as we can, affordable housing units. It's in our best interest to do that. It's not in our best interest to use up all our water. So we can't build those affordable housing units if we don't have the water. But if we do have the water, then we want to build those units. So I think we're just spinning our wheels here. We have to get a housing element to Sacramento, and yeah, we can talk all we want about the availability of our natural resource, water, but I just think it's a matter of academics. It's not a matter of something we can do anything about. Councilman Lara?
Yes, Mayor Blatz, thank you. I also agree about the water resource. Obviously, it's a concern. We're in a drought. We have to plan for it. But I think that it's been clear by Mr. Douglas that this is just a policy and we need to go through where mandated by the state. A question just in regards of the 60-day review cycle. Are they approving this element, the fifth cycle, or could they, or will they most likely come back and give us or question us on some of the language in the element?
Usually they come back with some questions for clarification, and so they have 60 days to do that. During the process, oftentimes we have a dialogue, several conference calls and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So the language when it comes to water purveyor, we can't add or tweak anything, or is that's just set dry on what they say? If they could provide us with the water, then we could build, or could we offer a process in there or not?
Well, it's fine for us to describe what the legal requirements are for will-serve letters and so forth. I mean, that doesn't change the city's policy.
Okay.
So, yeah, that we can describe those things.
Okay. And not to change topics, but I did have a question about the second unit compliance program. And I was also in favor of possibly adding maybe 640 square feet to 1,200 square feet. And I don't know if that's if we could do that before we submit our element. It's just because I feel like we could add, it just fits our community. And I think that 1,200 square feet and some properties could be developed. And I think I look at possibility, my parents moving into a second unit compliance, and 1,200 square feet is a lot more better than 640 square feet. And then also in expiring the allowable time, are we able to extend that, or should we extend it now, or what do you recommend?
For the amnesty
for
program?
The amnesty for second unit.
That's at the council's pleasure, whatever you think is appropriate. There's nothing in the housing element law that requires one or the other on that.
So it does take a zoning code amendment because we put the 14th in the zone, so we'd have to come back with that.
Is that easily changed, or is that easily changed at the time that it expires?
As the city manager said, it would require an ordinance amendment, which would have its own process, public hearings and so forth.
Okay. Is there a benefit with just staying it as it is versus changing it, or?
No, I think we're probably going to need to extend it because it has taken a while to get the program started up. When we approved the fourth cycle, we had timeframes in there, and we said that we would, run this through the end of June 2014. And so probably now's not the best time to change it while we're going through the review period, but right after that, we probably should change it to a more realistic date.
Okay. And then my last question, if I may, is regarding the 2-story on attachment E, which is attachment E on page 101. It's the last page on this item. And just for clarity then, you struck 25 feet and you just put 2 stories. So is it going to be 25 feet or 30 feet, but at 2 stories? Or are you even going to specify?
So the parameters of the overlay zone are set by the zoning ordinance. And I don't recall if we made that 25 feet when we did not, okay. Oh, that's right, because we had to go to 30 or, so, yeah, so that would be an implementation step. But I know there was a suggestion earlier to say 2 stories rather than 25 feet at the end of that paragraph under the box. We could make that change.
I think that's a good change.
Okay, perfect.
Any other comments by the council? I still have another card from Mr. Miley. Go ahead.
Okay, regarding the amnesty program, I agree with Judy that I'd like to see that extended 2 years. And I don't know if that is involved in our, what did we call it? our program, whatever, at some place, wherever.
So we will come back to the council with an ordinance making a recommendation on that.
Okay, and that's where we'll make
As a
these-
separate step.
Okay. And also regarding amnesty, somewhere in here, it mentioned that after the amnesty program, there would be penalties. I'd really like us to use a different format, rather than say, if you're not in compliance by this time, we're going to penalize you. Are we really doing that, or are we going to charge current fees for building improvements as opposed to past fees that they could have utilized? I would rather us say what that penalty is rather than just leaving it hanging out there. You know, is it truly a penalty? Or if they choose not to take advantage of the amnesty, are we going to simply charge current fees? And I don't see that as a penalty. If we can avoid the use of the word penalty, I'd like that.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Any other comments? I just have one when it comes to the amnesty program. The city can implement this amnesty program and have some control over the process that we'll use. But we still have to deal with the sanitary district. We still have to deal with water hookup. And the city really doesn't have a lot of say over that. So I think as part of us implementing this amnesty program, we have got to get together with the sanitary district and the water purveyor, because you've got major costs involved to legalize a second dwelling unit that is not properly hooked up to the sewer right now. And how many people can afford that, number one? And number two, how are we gonna, if we approve it, is it necessary for everything be in compliance? For instance, can we look at the amnesty, or whatever we're going to call it? I don't particularly care for amnesty, but let's say we're going to say we are going to legalize your unit, and we're not going to pay attention to the fact that it's not hooked up to the sewer correctly?
No, we plan to do exactly what you're saying, coordinate with those two districts so that the ombudsman will know what the answer to that question is.
But how does the ombudsman help the situation when the sanitary district says you got to pay $15,000, there's a meter fee or whatever for hooking it up to water, and then we say you have to bring a building into compliance, and that's going to be so excessive when it comes to a cost of this second dwelling unit? What would be the impetus for anybody to want to do it?
Yeah, so the plan is to meet with the water district and try and work those issues out in advance. And, you know, there's a possibility it'll be difficult to do if the water districts and the sanitary district don't want to cooperate.
And then the other thing is there's people out there now that have paid the $15,000 to, quote, legalize their units. I think we need to pay special attention to them. Okay. All right. Bill, you had a second card, and I would like to ask you about it. Apparently you have a presentation on the housing plan.
No, it's just 4.5 minutes long.
Oh, okay. I'd like to hear it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
So
you.
go ahead.
Bill Miley, North Signal Street. I do want to just add something about the purveyor providing will serve. As I recall, your council modified an ordinance which now says that there has to be a letter of availability from any supplier to the purveyor. So Golden State would have to get a letter from Casitas, according to your ordinance, that says, isn't that right? That's right. Okay, so we've covered that. All right. So that's no problem. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, I get a little confused sometimes and I'm not sure where I am, but I think I know where I am. Okay. Good evening. I speak tonight for myself, and any similarity to intelligent comments is purely coincidence. Uh-oh. I was thinking I was in my improv class on Saturday, so, okay. So, again, we have the dilemma of approving a housing plan, which is in front of us, to be reviewed and likely to be approved by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or an opportunity of creating a plan which truly represents our city of Ojai, but then having to do a little negotiation with the state analysts on why our plan meets the intent of the housing laws and helps to meet our affordable housing needs, mainly rental dwelling units with some for sale dwelling units. With no executive summary to pull it all together, it's difficult to visualize how it might fit. Since I was part of the Ojai Democratic Club Housing Committee, but speaking for myself right now, I strongly support an executive summary for this document. How we formulate our final RENA numbers in economic terms, affordability levels, is a key to stating just who we are, I believe. It seems apparent that no one wants to adjust or modify the RENA chart allocation numbers. Not the planning commissioners, not the city manager, although he better not if he knows what's good for his job's health, and likely, but I hope I'm wrong, your city council. Many of us believe, based on the Census 2010, the California Finance Department data 2012, the American Community Survey data, and the SCAG profile data of Ojai, that the numbers should be tweaked. Doing so would create what this city stands for, we believe, or I believe, caring, being fair, and empathetic. To wit, making the RENA numbers all affordable, 100% affordable. This need is really in dwelling units, affordable rental dwelling units. I believe the state wants to see a plan which truly describes and shows our needs, and ours should do that. For a moment, let's look at the creation of the RENA numbers and where they came from. I have asked people who likely should know, and the best reply is they come from SCAG, the Southern California Association of Government Staff, using State Department of Finance numbers, and then they focus on the city of Ojai after a brief stop at the Ventura County Organization of Governments, probably in Camarillo. So how did SCAG craft the number of 155 above moderate dwelling units, above moderate affordable levels, dwelling units as a high need for Ojai in a housing document on affordable housing? I have no clue. Percentage-wise, that's 41% of the housing need numbers that we have in our RENA group that SCAG thinks we should facilitate. Do we need to facilitate market rate housing because it's hard to build and needs government help? 3 no's, no, no, and no. And then I want to say balderdash. And for those of you not familiar with the term, which was originated in 1674, other words which are synonymous are nonsense, baloney, hooey, malarkey, and nuts. And those of you who remember the Second World War remember the Battle of the Bulge. And finally, poppycock. So let's turn the 155 into affordable numbers. Some of the data in your draft plan speaks to the needs. Great numbers of households and families spend more than they should ever on housing, leaving much less for life's other needs. But this draft does not clearly show the housing and income needs. Some of that data is in the plan's charts, Some of the data in the plan chart should be questioned as to their accuracy, especially those coming from SCAG in the document they sent us called Profile of Ojai. An example of the wrong data is the school district enrollment decline over past years. The Democratic Housing Committee met with Superintendent of Schools Hank Bangzer last week, and we showed him the profile data on the enrollment. And he said, wow, he said, that's really wrong. Enrollment has declined steadily, but not like the SCAG reported. They had it dropping by 1,000 students in 2009. It's like, whoosh, whoosh, like the stock market did, a couple of months ago. It did not happen. The housing element draft needs to have school enrollment added, because I don't believe it's there, with the implication that affordable housing would help the enrollment picture. Families, young families, will be able to rent and buy. The Ojai Democratic Club's documentation data paper, which was sent to you, is intended to support the club's housing committee statement, which Ms. Murphy made. It well shows excessive rental costs, scarce rental availability, many lower income families, women working full-time making $25,000 less than full-time men who make $64,000, and women make $40,000 within the city of Ojai. Okay? And we have a high percentage of household and families falling into the affordable income category. We also have lots of people paying much more than 30% for rent and mortgage. In my opinion, the data document I just referred to should be reviewed for data information which, when added to this draft report, will make a better case for justifying what we are trying to accomplish. Affordability is the purpose of the state housing laws. Affordability is the enormous need within our city. Affordability is the goal of housing plans. Affordability is the goal of our plan. And lots of folks need affordable housing. In conclusion, we have seen the need, seen the struggles, seen the economic pain, seen the school enrollment go down, seen families turn away from here to live someplace else, seen our children grow up, leave for a while, come back with no place they can afford. So affordability is the key. Let's get the affordable key, open the door to fairness, equitableness, and economic reality. And as Warner Brothers says, that's all, folks.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. I want to thank the document that was provided to us by the Ojai Valley Democratic Club. It was full of some really good information, demographic information, and I found it extremely interesting. One thing that I guess I have two questions. One is, there's nothing in a housing element that says that if we build on every overlay for affordable housing, we can't put overlays on additional property. Isn't that correct? Yes. Okay. So if we were to have a build out on all of our overlays, then the city council could designate more property as overlays, even in the middle of the cycle after an approved plan.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
The arena is a minimum. You have to plan for at least that much, but you can plan for more.
Okay. The next question I have is that people tend to live as close as they possibly can to where they work. And while we're saying that we need affordable housing, which we do for our current population, we need it, but we're anticipating even more. My question, and it's more of a rhetorical question than it is one that I'm expecting an answer for, is that assuming that we have affordable housing, are we going to be so much more affordable than somewhere in the county or somewhere in Ventura, that somebody is going to live in Ojai and travel to Ventura to work. And the one demographics that I have looked for and haven't seen, and I didn't see it in the document that was given to me, if it's there, I apologize, is how many people live outside of Ojai and travel here to work. Because not only do we have a population that needs affordable housing, but if we're going to expand on that affordable housing, we really need to expand it with people that are working in Ojai and leaving Ojai to go to the county or to Ventura or whatever to live. And that's, I think, an important point. Councilwoman Smith?
I just want to comment on it. It is, and there are especially a lot of the hospital workers. They do go up from Ventura, Oxnard to come to Community Memorial House, to come to Ojai Hospital to work, yes.
And I'm pretty sure there's quite a few that work at the inn. It's the largest employer. But it's just one of those interesting things that we really need to provide affordable housing for those people, as well as people that already live here. Any further comments or questions of the council? Mr. Clark, what is it exactly you need from us this evening on this?
We do have attachments E and attachment C, which propose new language, so we'd like you to look at those and see if you'd like to approve that language or not.
Okay.
And then the other thing is to authorize us to submit the element to HCD for the 60-day review.
Okay. So really what we're looking for is the approval of the proposed revisions of the zoning designations and development standards.
Uh-huh.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And approve the proposed revisions to the second unit program.
Yes.
And then authorize you to submit the housing
Exactly.
element. Okay. Any further comments from council on any of those items?
I just have a comment.
Councilman Lara.
Mayor Blatz. So by approving the revisions to the second unit program, are we then going to put off the extension? Or is that just something that we're going to do later on the line?
I believe it's something we're going to do later on rather than not mix it into this. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. Since it requires an ordinance, we can't do it as part of this.
Okay.
So we would just do it at a subsequent meeting.
So I would be in favor of revisions if we could, I don't know how the other council members feel, if we could exceed the square footage to 1,200 square feet also. And I don't know if we could do that in these particular.
Well, let me just kind of comment on that. We have a unit is a unit as far as this plan is concerned. Doesn't make any difference what size it is. It could be 200 square feet or it could be 1,200 square feet. Okay. A unit is a unit. Now, we may believe that if we could build a bigger unit, that there's a more opportunity for that unit to be built, whereas there's less likelihood somebody would build a 600 square foot unit than a 1,200 square foot unit. But we really don't have to deal with that here. The zoning code can be amended at a later date, allowing on certain size parcels the 1,200 square foot size second dwelling unit, which isn't allowed now. Mm-hmm. But as far as this plan is concerned, doesn't make any difference what size the unit is, it's a unit.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, if I may make a motion, to approve the proposed revisions to the zoning designation and development standards, attachment E. Should I make it as a whole?
Sure.
Approve the proposed revision to second unit program, attachment C. Authorize staff to submit the draft element to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, for the mandatory 60-day review.
I'll second that.
Second. Okay, I just want to thank everybody in the audience for all their comments with regard to this particular topic. Any further discussion by council? Roll call, please.
Lara?
Yes.
Clapp?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. All right, moving on to the next agenda item. This is the second unit compliance volunteer ombudsman program. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. One of the things that we need to put in place in order to move forward with the second unit compliance program is an ombudsman program. And before he left, Mr. Mullane worked with Mr. Stewart to come up with this particular proposal. And the idea is to recruit multiple volunteer ombudsmen who have the qualifications that are necessary to look at a house, a unit, a potential unit, and determine what changes or lack of changes might be needed in order for them to comply. So basically, the ombudsman is someone that a property owner can go to and ask questions about their unit, and have the ombudsman look at their unit and advise them without turning themselves into the city as having an unpermitted unit. And so the proposal is that we put together a committee composed of a member of the real estate community, the community development director, and the building official, who would interview people who desire to be volunteer ombudsmen to determine if they have the qualifications to perform that function. And then they would be trained and authorized to proceed. So generally, that's the program, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions by the council? No?
I do have a
Yeah.
comment. On pardon?
The air. They say it's cold.
Is the air conditioner on? All right, well, I hear something blowing, so if you could check it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Is it blowing back there, Greg? It's blowing back there. Just turn it off. Let it go to sleep. Save the energy.
Yeah, she will. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel, the floor is yours.
Okay. 3-3, page 3-3 of the packet. The committee members who will be selecting the ombudsman, I can't pronounce it.
It's a tough one.
We have it, to me it seems weighted. We have one member of the real estate community, community development director, building official. I'd like to somehow see a different balance in that. I'd like to see maybe if we want to say a member of real estate, that's fine. But there are members at large, there are residents in this community who have the same required knowledge. And then I would be happier because it wouldn't feel so weighted.
That's fine.
What's the total number on this?
Well, it doesn't, there's no specific number that we have to have or not have. Their purpose is to interview people who are potential ombudsmen, or however you say it, and determine whether they have the qualifications to do the job. So if you want to have more people on the selection group, there's really no problem with that.
Yeah, and that's what I would like, because currently the selection committee is a member of real estate, community development director, and the building official. I'd rather see a community member. That's it.
Okay, any other comments? No, we have a speaker's card on this. Bob Daddy.
Thank you. Yeah, I took a look at this thing and I thought, it almost feels that when you have the building department, community development, the person they pick is going to be their creation. And what you're going to have is, we have had, at least the 16 years I've been here, a distrust of the community development department. Building, planning, whatever you want. It's a general distrust. It's the thing you hear the most complaints from the residents. The biggest problem we have in this city is that department. It's still that department. If we go ahead and we weight this thing that way, I guarantee you this thing isn't going to fly. And we really need it to fly. We need this thing to work. We need it to go. And the last thing with this is, we have a really simple solution. The way we don't use one more gallon of water is we go ahead and get enough units through the amnesty program to not build anymore. We don't add one more traffic trip. We don't add one more gallon of water we use. We don't add one more meter. Simple solution. The more we can get these permitted units, get them into compliance, the easier it is on resources, and the better we are all the way around. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I tend to agree. I don't feel comfortable with the balance here, and I'm almost thinking that third one should be one of us, but I'm throwing it out there for
I was
discussion.
thinking maybe somebody from the planning commission.
Yeah. What about a contractor in
Yeah,
town? They
a
would be a
contractor.
building, a licensed contractor who has a license in the city of
mind when I
Ojai.
said
Yeah.
A community member.
Is somebody in the planning
Yeah.
commission or a licensed contractor?
Yeah.
Maybe all three should be community
But
members.
this is the one who we're going to pick.
Yeah,
right?
they're going to pick.
They're going to
right.
pick the volunteer
Right.
ombudsman, right?
Right.
So
So
they're
they
going to
need
be
to
the
have a-
selection committee.
They're going to
right.
create a list.
Okay.
And they need to have knowledge of codes so
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
can pick somebody with knowledge of codes.
So I think a licensed contractor or
Yeah.
would be an.
Or
they're in
retired,
tri-
or
right.
retired contractor.
Right, that
or-
might be a good addition, or eliminate somebody and add them on.
But
We have to
real-
keep an odd number, right, because of
Yeah.
those.
Real estate, community development director, and a licensed or retired contractor.
And Mr. Daddy is correct. No, don't get it.
Good.
And that is, right now, in the city of Ojai, one of the problems that we are still working on is to reestablish trust between the citizens and the staff.
Correct. And everything we're doing when it comes to this position with the Building Appeals Board is to try to get more community involvement, because it's not that we are trying to have the appearance of transparency or be transparent. It's because that's the way it should be. We should have involvement with the people that are on that appeals board, with these ombudsmen that are totally independent of the city after they're appointed, so that they have absolutely total firewall between themselves and the community development director.
And one more comment. Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. And I want the person who wants to take a look at whether or not he can or should bring a unit into compliance, I want that person to feel safe. And I think one way to do that is by taking our staff out of the loop as far as creating the list.
Ah, I hear what you're saying.
Completely out of the loop. Have nobody from the staff. Have nobody.
All these three people are doing, all they're doing is selecting
Right.
members to go
Oh, you're
on the
talking about
list.
the ombudsman himself. You don't want that to be,
No, I don't want that to be a staff member.
oh, no.
No,
it's
of
not
course
gonna be.
not.
No.
No.
I think that's,
But what I was saying is, the three members of the community deciding on the list, maybe there should be no staff on that either.
oh,
Because it is to benefit and keep safe a member of the public who wants to come forward and take a look without fear.
So let me just give you the counter argument. We need to be able to figure out if the applicants are able to understand the building codes and understand the rules that relate to second units. So somehow staff needs to work with the ombudsman, and the idea here was that they would select them. If you don't want them to be in the selection route, put the mayor and the planning commission director in instead of them, and then we'll have the staff work with those guys.
Okay, I agree that the ombudsman, that person should be able to work with staff. And I'm also saying that the people determining that list, do not have to be staff. We have a lot of resources out there.
So So my suggestion would be put the mayor or his appointee and the planning commission director or his appointee instead of the staff, and then the staff people will work with that selection board as staff.
But won't be one of the
But won't
people to
make the
make the selection. I think it should be an odd number, but I wouldn't mind having, I think, to replace the community development director with one of us would be fine. Councilman Lara?
No, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying. I want to repeat.
Yeah.
Just looking at it as more of a efficiency, I think that we don't have the, right now would be to our benefit to maybe select the mayor and maybe somebody that's working on the building code that's knowledgeable to be on the selected, on the panel, selecting the ombudsman and having the real estate community. So keeping it at 3, keeping it simple and utilizing our resources.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilwoman
No
Clapp.
offense, but Councilman Lara is a licensed contractor, are you not?
For landscape, but
landscaping,
not for building.
Because I was thinking maybe you have more of a knowledge of codes than maybe the mayor does.
Right.
And
Well, I
maybe
think,
as a body, maybe there would be somebody that would be more knowledgeable, maybe more.
I agree, but we're not just putting this into practice for now, we're putting into practice for the future. Now, obviously, we can't bind future councils. I think probably it probably should be the mayor, and then give the mayor the flexibility to appoint someone from the council that may have more expertise than he or she does.
Or give the mayor the flexibility to appoint someone from the community.
Or from the planning commission.
Right, except I mean, first of all, we have to pick the member of the real estate community. We have to pick the contractor. I don't know who's going to be doing that. I guess perhaps that's going to be the mayor and the mayor pro tem,
I don't know.
because it's going to have to
Mr.
come.
Clark?
I think the selection committee would have to do it.
Yeah.
Which is the mayor and the mayor pro tem.
Right. And then we would select 2, and so I think maybe that's.
Okay, so we get to do what we've been
Right.
doing
Yeah.
a lot and enjoying.
And
it.
let me just tell the council that my intention would be that if we decide that it's going to be the mayor and a member of the real estate community and a member that's a licensed contractor or a retired contractor, it would not be my intention to be on the selection committee. I would appoint someone who's on the council now that has more knowledge in terms of building than I do.
And I like that you have that flexibility.
All right.
Or I would suggest on the planning commission.
Or maybe give the mayor the opportunity to appoint somebody from the planning
Or you
commission.
can, as far as I'm concerned, you can increase your pool by going out to the community. And I will mention that our discussing this is all well and good, but we also have to have people willing to serve.
Exactly. I don't think they're lining up.
That's right. Well, and my other question, Mr. Clark, is how many really, when this program goes into place, how many of these individuals do we really need?
Boy, it's very hard to know, because the idea is that those who are qualified would be put on a list, and then if someone wants to have their unit looked at, they could look at the list. So it'd be
Okay.
nice to have several.
When you say several, are you talking 10, 12, 15?
I don't think there's a need for that many. But if there's that many who want to come forward, that might be fine. So
Okay.
I would think we would
But
want to get at least 3 or 4. But,
Okay.
But if we get more than that, I don't see any problem with it.
Okay.
And it may
Now,
also
my other
busy.
question, right.
How much use we get. We may need to expand our list.
My other question would be, are there any conflicts, Mr. Fletcher, between anyone serving in this capacity as an ombudsman who may be serving in the capacity of a commissioner or a board member?
I don't see any conflict. I don't see any conflict there, that if they're already sitting on the city board or commission. I had mentioned to the manager today, I think one issue we may have to deal with is, since these ombuds folks
We're going to have
I'll
classes
coin that
on
one,
that
yeah.
next week.
Yeah, these folks. Maybe having a big influence on project entitlements, we may require them, and the clerk and I were going to do some research with it, to file a 700 form.
Yeah.
Like we do with building officials, and we do with board and commissioners. So if we're board and, so if there happen to be board and commissioners, then that's okay, they're already, but we don't know, what the Political Reform Act requires is any city official, and I believe that irrespective of what we're talking about here, these folks are going to be in one form or fashion city officials. Their powers and their responsibilities are being defined by the city action here. So they're not, we're not going to another agency to get someone. We are creating these roles of ombudsperson, and therefore I think there really are city officials, one form or another. And under the Act, it says if they exercise independent authority or decision making that or significantly influence a decision of the city, then they are a designated official and they have to file a 700 form. I don't have a definitive answer, but I think we may have an issue here, because you don't want to find out that this person has been directing work to someone or somebody else, and they're also probably going to have a conflict of interest issue about whether they can advise someone a property within 500 feet that they may own. Yeah, we have to make sure that they are truly independent in giving this advice to individuals, because the property owner is going to rely upon this person to say, yeah, it looks like you're pretty good. You can get through this. You look pretty good with the code, not major modifications. Here's we talked to the sanitation district about sewer hookups, and they're going to come into the city and apply and find out that information was all wrong, and they're going to blame us because they got what they would perceive as bad advice from this ombudsperson. So I think they're going to have a role. We want to make them as autonomous as possible, so the community respects their independence, and they're getting independent advice. And our role is to create something of a communication wall between those people and the city staff from an enforcement standpoint. But they're still exercising a lot of influence in some official role with the city. So that's the only thing I'm saying is we may require them to file a 700 form.
Will they be serving at the pleasure of the city council?
We haven't, right at this point, yes. I mean, at this point, we haven't created and at this point, I'm not been recommending that we overly bureaucratize this either. We're trying to create these city volunteers that are going to be helping out, and that's fine, we leave it alone at that. I don't want to create terms and offices, but yes, they serve at the pleasure, which means I also think this committee can take a person off the list. If we wind up with an ombudsperson who gets a lot of complaints,
okay,
we have to have the autonomy, the ability to take them off the list too.
Okay, thank you. After our discussion, does anybody in the audience have anything further they want to say? Bob?
We have a lot of really terrific ex-planning commissioners. Nancy Peterson, Andy Whitman, Cordis Coulter, they're all residents. We've got a lot of great people out there. I mean, we're talking about a panel to find these great people and put them in there, but we got a lot of great people that are going to help. So, the sooner you can get that thing dusted off, the sooner we can start running these people through, because we need to hurry on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, come forward, please.
My name's Dan McLaughlin. I'm a retired building official and building inspector, and I have legalized a lot of illegal dwelling units. It is not that simple. You will run into some that need major structural repairs. You'll find some that are very easy, well done. It's something to think about. You also have to think about if that house gets sold and they find things, who are they going to come back and blame? Are they going to blame me if I'm that person, or are they going to blame the council for hiring that individual? So it's very important. There's a lot more, and finding a person is not that easy. You have to remember, architects are very strong in architectural. They're very weak possibly in plumbing, electrical, mechanical. Contractors are strong in their trade. Okay? So you almost have to, I hate to tell you, you have to get a building inspector. Somebody that's trained in all the codes, but also likes to work with people. And I know there are people out there, building inspectors, that are not well liked, and there are a lot that are liked. So you want to find somebody that's workable, because you will find a whole gambit of things on whether it's a garage conversion or it's just a unit that was built without permits. And I've worked in a jurisdiction where we had 2 sand districts and a water district. I can totally understand the complications that happens, and their fees are very, very high, and they don't tend to want to lower them down. So it's another complication in it.
You're hired.
My wife won't let me, so.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
And Mr. McLaughlin, would you mention who your wife is, please?
My wife is Ann McLaughlin, your new planning director.
She's our interim. So, and my question to our city attorney is, so would that be a conflict?
I think for a lot of reasons, recommend no.
Yeah.
Mainly because my client, Ms. McLaughlin, says she doesn't want him to do it, so.
I do have some retired friends that are willing to work, and they do like working with people. So there are people out there. It's just that's one of your questions, is what are their backgrounds? Even building inspectors, you want to make sure they're certified, that they've worked and gone through the training to be doing what you're looking for them to do. There are, and I don't mean all architects, some that are versed in plumbing, electrical, mechanical. So there are people out there. It's just people that want to volunteer. So you're going to look for people in my trade, hopefully that are retired.
Yeah.
But I would be willing to sit on the board. So.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we'd like to keep you in reserve.
And Mayor Pro Tem Strobel and I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. McLaughlin. He had applied for one of the positions on one of our commissions, and it was a pleasure. So thank you for your comments tonight. All right, what's the council's pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the second unit volunteer ombudsman program policies and procedure.
As amended with the makeup of the
As
committee to-
amended.
Okay. And that would be a real estate person, a general contractor, and the mayor or his or her designee?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Latz?
Yes. All right. Moving right along.
You guys gotta wait for the emergency light.
We're almost
You've
done.
gotta wait for the light now, you can't go.
What?
I mean, this is the best part of the meeting. This is what everybody's been waiting for. Item number 4 on our agenda is a pedestrian crosswalk beacon demonstration at Ventura Street on Ojai Avenue. And I take it that Mr. Grant will be making this presentation. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, well, yeah, whether we launch right into that or not, but the point of this conversation is that there's quite a few unsignaled, or sometimes they're called mid-block crosswalks, even though they may not be at mid-blocks. But typically, the safe pedestrian crosswalks are signalized either with a pedestrian signal that is like at the library here that's photographed. And you hit the switch, and as I think most of us know, there's in-pavement lighting. And the other ones, as you come into town at Kenyatta, at Blanche, and as you continue into the arcade, in the east end of the arcade, and at Montgomery, and out at Park, I think is the last one out there. You know, all of those are not signalized, and they're very unsafe. We've had a lot of concern from residents, in particular the Complete Streets Committee is focused on the safety of these pedestrian crosswalks. So as a Complete Street project that was approved in this year's budget, in the CIP, the 5-year capital improvement plan, one of the demonstration projects was to try to improve the safety of this, is to take the existing in-pavement lighting, which has been extremely expensive to maintain. It's each one of those little lights in the street they used to cost $800 each to replace, just for the materials alone. And now they're going up to $1,200, soon to be discontinued by this company. $800 is for rebuilt unit anyways. And not only that, you have to shut down the street. You have to get a crew out there to direct traffic and to get these things out of the street after they've been driven over for a few thousand miles of trucks and so on. And it's quite a project. So the in-street maintenance, most municipalities are getting away from these in-street lighting. And the new proposed lighting, they call them RRFB, which is an acronym for rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And it's a kind of a neat system where the existing triangular caution that shows the pedestrian symbol there, and then you've got the arrow below it. There's a small, it's only about 4 or 5 inches tall and about 2 foot wide, of these rapid flashing beacons, is LEDs. And they work well with solar because they're low power usage. And it's a little less aesthetically intrusive if you do it with AC, with electricity, if you've got it available, standard AC current, which in this case we do. So the proposal is to take, right now we have 5 of the lights out, so we're talking over $4,000 just in parts to repair those. We just did that 2 years ago for more than that many lights were out. So if we replace these for $5,000, I'm sorry, a little over $4,000, we can actually install this RRFB system. We just move that little space between the arrow and the pedestrian symbol and insert these rapid flashing beacons, and we'll connect them to the electricity, and we'll actually upgrade the button that you press there so that whatever visually impaired people can hear. It's just a very minor sound that they can hear when they get up near it, and it's kind of helpful. We've already heard a few people who were visually impaired and were unaware we had this crosswalk available here in town, so it was kind of nice to know that would be helpful to them. So on that note, I think maybe what everybody's really waiting for is to see this a video of a flasher video, I guess we'll call it. Yes. And all right, so what this shows right now is the existing crosswalk at the Ventura Library, and then you can see part of it is due to the camera, but you can't even see these lights blinking right now. But it also has to do with the angle they're directed towards the cars, but they're very dim right now. In the daytime, this is taken right around noon. And then at nighttime, they do a lot better, but they still, they're not the brightest when you compare it to the contrasting lights in the background. Yeah, it's difficult to see. And it is a little better from the car's perspective. And then what we've done here now is we've actually taken a slick little option, and we've inserted what it would be like to put in these lights, so you can kind of see. I thought maybe I could stop that, but I guess I can't, yeah. But you can see, now you can see over there that you've got the, we've actually inserted, that's all it would be the difference. So aesthetically, it's very minimal impact. So we're quite sensitive to that in my department. We had a traumatic experience last summer. We put in some signs, crosswalks, and there's still some scars healing on that. And so these new lights will be minimal aesthetic impact to try to, learn a lesson from that one anyhow. So you can see what that's the only difference is, a very minor on the side. And these are showed to have very high compliance compared to the any other existing options out there. And you can imagine that the maintenance of these systems are way less. You're doing that on the side of the road. You don't have to close the traffic down. And they're not impacted and broken, so they're there at nighttime.
Oh, it's on both sides?
They'll be on both sides, right? And they're triggered by the same Wi-Fi signal that will cut them off, right? So the whole idea is there that maintenance now, all these lights that are broken are a result of rocks and stones getting stuck in the tire tread, and they hit that light and they break it, and water gets in there and wrecks it. And it becomes very difficult to just remove the bolts that are in the roadway after they're all broken up by the rocks and the treads and so on. So it should be, I don't think we'll even see barely any maintenance required on this side. There's some batteries that need to be replaced every 3 to 5 years that are on the little hand signal, but otherwise it should be extremely low maintenance. And the cost is already budgeted, but I think anyways, if we decided not to go ahead with this project, we'd have to spend over $4,000 just to repair the existing ones, with the expectation we'll be spending another $2,000 a year for maintenance. So I think that gives an idea what the demonstration is about, and be answered.
Can we have the lights back on, please? There we go. Thank you, Greg. Any questions of council on this?
I think this is a no-brainer, frankly.
Anybody in the audience want to speak to this?
No, I sat in this complete streets meeting a lot.
Okay.
And I apologize for suggesting green for those signs downtown.
All right. All right, then I will,
Mayor, I have something.
yes.
This last Sunday, we were in Ventura at the Rubicon Theater, and right at that intersection, they have those lights, and they work really nice. And they have a nice little message that says, cross, but watch for the cars.
Yeah.
Worked really well. I like it.
Great, thank you. So you're looking for, you're looking for us to have watched the presentation, which we did tentatively, I'm sure, and approve the demonstration installation of the system.
Mr.
Is that
Mayor?
correct? Yes.
If there's no questions from.
Any questions? No.
I would move to approve a demonstration installation of the system at the Ventura Street crosswalk in Ojai, on Ojai Avenue, of the pedestrian crosswalk rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And I, for some reason, can't even talk tonight. Just forgive me.
Anybody want to second that?
Yes, I will second that.
All right, any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. All right, we're going to adjourn as the Ojai City Council and convene as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency. And we have a consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor, or can we do it by acclamation, the consent?
No, we
Okay,
have
roll call, please.
Laura?
Yes.
Clapp? Yes. Smith?
Yes.
Strobel?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes. There's no discussion items. We're going to adjourn as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency reconvene as the Ojai City Council. Do any of the council members have any reports this evening? No? Then I will get the oral reports from staff members and the city manager.
Just thank you very much for your support in that discussion that we had earlier.
Welcome. Mr. Fletcher? Chief? All right. Greg, do you have anything else to add?
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
do have something to report.
Okay.
I wanted to thank Mr. Fletcher, our city attorney, for spending 2 hours with me this afternoon going over the public art ordinance. And I think we're going to be much happier. I'm
Good.
going to be happy, and that's what counts.
It's all about
That's
you.
right.
It's all
That's
about
right.
me. It's all about you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We stand adjourned.